Right, let's get to today's panel discussion sponsored by Refinitiv. This week, the WEF promised concrete measures on helping global business shift to stakeholder capitalism. Here to discuss whether they've succeeded and much more besides. Booking.com Chairwoman Gillian Gurría stays with us from the OECD, and Badr Jafar from Crescent Enterprises joins as well. Welcome to both of you. Look, very quickly, before we get into that big stakeholder capitalism bit, the Secretary-General and I have been talking about this digital tax. Where is Booking.com on this? Because it would seem to me it's going to be pretty bad for your business, ultimately.
Yeah, I think if you think about regulation, that companies are always better off if it's not fragmented. I think digital tax is an example that is extremely fragmented. So we have been pushing for a global solution as well, because digital tax creates double taxation. It creates enormous difficulties for businesses like Booking.com.
Okay, so you don't like this idea then? You don't like this idea of where they're going, where the Secretary-General, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin and Bruno Le Maire...
no, I prefer a global solution because I think it's better for everybody.
You just supported it.
Okay, you want the OECD to sort this thing out.
Absolutely.
Okay. But you need the US to get on side.
Yeah.
That's the important thing, right? Okay.
Badr, everybody on board.
Yeah. Badr, great to see you here. You and I did an event at the OECD actually last year, and it was all about trust. It was all about trust in business. I mean, it seems to me that companies are now setting specific and measurable goals. Some people have said this is a discovery year here in Davos. Is there a sense you're getting that actually we can move forward on this whole trust thing?
I think it's useful to look at it in the context of sort of the bigger picture. I mean, Davos is the birthplace of the so-called Fourth Industrial Revolution, and how technology is going to make things better for everybody. But you sometimes get the feeling that Silicon Valley is the only place left in the world not trying to become Silicon Valley. But the question is, if we do, you know, technology in itself doesn't drive change. We, the so-called connected people, are the real agents of change.
Yeah.
And time will tell whether we've been able to use and harness the power of technology for the betterment of humanity and our habitat, or just to exacerbate our own flaws. So rather than chasing after the sort of next billion-dollar company, more of a focus on solutions that can impact 1 billion people. I think those are, you know, trust is not something that you can buy or generate. Trust is something you have to earn. And in the context of technology, really, you know, companies, but also individuals demonstrating that they really are trying to harness the power of technology to make things better for people and for the planet is what's going to generate trust. I
mean, Gillian, is it, I mentioned this discovery year, you know, measurable goals, stakeholder capitalism. It's got to, as Badr says, it's got to come from the leaders and the people in these companies rather than the technology. What are you doing at Booking.com?
Yeah, so there's a lot happening at Booking.com, and if you think about the future of travel and tourism, that will all be about technology, but also about customers making sustainable choices. And this is something that Booking is very active in, to see how can we help customers make sustainable choices. And we see through data that customers actually want to make sustainable choices, but we just need to make sure they also understand what is a sustainable choice. And Booking is at the intersection, if you think about technology and tourism. So we can play actually a very big role in this, in helping our partners and our customers.
You know, I know you have to shoot off in a second, so I want to just bring you in, Secretary General, because you're on the WEF board, right? The trust issue and the stakeholder capitalist issue and the diplomacy and the multilateralism and all these other big themes, does it feel it's coming back now, or are you still sitting around the table on the board trying to work out how to make all this work?
It's not optional. You know, how do you deal with international trade issues if not multilaterally? How do you deal with investment issues if not multilaterally? You know, cross-border investments, international investments. How do you deal with climate? How do you deal with the question of migration if not multilaterally? So the question is not whether or to go multilateral or not, but how best to go multilateral. What are the best approaches? Because I insist it's the only way to go.
But, you know, we hear this a lot. It's not optional. We haven't got a choice. We hear it on climate. We hear it on most of these big issues. I guess the point is we now need to see solutions. We need to have we need companies and governments to sit down and say, look, we've known it's not optional for a long time. This is what we're going to do about it. So what are they doing about it?
The problem is that we had the crisis and we had the destruction of jobs and opportunities in the economy, and we had a destruction of, and we had an increase in inequalities. So what you have today is the leftover is a great destruction of trust. This is where the issues that you were talking about here come in, and trust in what? In democracy, but also in presidents, in prime ministers, in ministers, in political parties, in multinational corporations, in financial institutions, etc. Everything that we have built over the last 100 years, it hasn't delivered, and therefore people are angry, frustrated. You see these flare-ups all over the place, and you see the protest everywhere. So no surprise there. So we have to get on with it, so that we can deliver.
Go ahead, Badr.
No, so you mentioned the role of government and business.
Yep.
I just want to mention the role of, I think, the very important role of the often forgotten or neglected child of the capital system, and that is philanthropic capital.
Yep.
There's a huge amount of over $1 trillion a year is dispersed in philanthropic capital around the world. And in the US alone, $430 billion a year. Closer to home, between zakat, which is compulsory almsgiving, Islamic almsgiving, and sadaqah, discretionary almsgiving, anywhere between $300 billion to $1 trillion a year is disbursed in philanthropic capital. The question is, where is that money going? Is it really being channeled towards these causes that we're talking about, helping to bridge the gap in many ways, in many cases, in trust? That, I think, is a huge missed opportunity. Again, technology, again, has a phenomenal role to play in helping to channel those, or that huge pool of philanthropic capital to where it's needed the
Why
most.
has it come under such a threat, philanthropy, do you think?
I think there is, it's often seen as a peripheral player, but also in some parts of the world, often regarded with a high degree of skepticism. And that's, there are historical, perhaps in some cases, socio-political reasons why that is the case. But therein lies the opportunity to bring it to the fore. Today, of course, blended finance is something that's being touted as a very important way and tool and measure to bridge that gap between, government capital and business capital going towards addressing challenges.
Gillian, I'm going to bring you back in a sec, but I know I need to let you go, but I've got a really quick question for you before you go. I think the OECD is predicting the worst year in a decade in terms of global growth this year. It's pretty gloomy.
2.9% last year, 3% for this year and next.
Gloomy.
So we're even below the IMF. These are the lowest figures since the financial crisis, and the reason is fairly straightforward. The trade tensions are affecting the confidence, the trust, and that is provoking investment to be withheld, because you don't know. You invest to produce. You produce to sell. If you don't know if you can sell, then of course you don't invest. So the economy is dropped, and we are of course having a very low rate of growth of trade, practically flat. The same thing with investment, and therefore growth has really slowed down.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I know we've got to let you go. Yeah, it's great to see you again this year, as always, every year. Angel Gurría from the OECD. I want to keep you two. And Gillian, let's bring the whole climate piece in, because of course that was very much at the top of the agenda this year. Responsible tourism, green travel. These must be trends affecting your business quite significantly, I would imagine.
Yeah, affecting your business, I think if you think about a platform like Booking.com, and we measure consumers a lot, and you see that consumers more and more also want to make these type of choices, right? So in the end, it's not that it has an impact on your business, but how can you embrace this part and make sure that you make these type of improvements for consumers? I think there's a lot of unclarity today with consumers as to, what is now sustainable choice, what do the labels mean that are out there. So there's a lot of work to do.
But very crudely, and forgive my ignorance here, but flying less means lower profits, I would imagine, for Booking.com, right?
Yeah, Booking.com is not operating flights, right? So we are a platform that mainly is offering accommodation and helping customers throughout their
But customers
stay.
need to get to these places, right?
Correct. Yes,
So
absolutely.
how much of a knock is your bottom line getting on the back of the green push?
Yeah, so today I wouldn't say that that has an impact on our business, right? But I think as a business, you need to start thinking through what can you do to basically make the future of travel more sustainable. And Booking.com for years has been very active. We have a program where we actively support startups that are active in sustainable tourism to make their impact bigger. So there's lots of activities that we are already undertaking.
Were you here for the President Trump's address?
I was.
You were?
Wasn't in the room, but I was there.
You weren't in the room, but I'm sure you heard it. I mean, it's interesting what people are saying on the back of it. Yes, it sounded very much like a campaign speech, but the sort of trickles on the back of that we've been getting, or the word is that maybe there's a chink of light that he's coming round on certain issues, or there's a little bit more optimism that he's coming round on certain issues. What are your thoughts about it?
I think whether President Trump comes around on certain issues or doesn't is besides the point in many ways.
Okay.
I think today, what's positive about where we are today in this overall discussion and debate about what we need to do and how we need to get to a much more sustainable world and environment, of course, including, of course, the very important climate challenge, is that I think we've reached a tipping point from an awareness perspective. But the question is, now that we have that momentum from an awareness perspective, how can we move from traction to action? Mm-hmm. And I think with all global challenges today, it seems like the world has, and everybody actually has, a much shorter attention span to things. And they get bored of issues and then move on to the next. So while this is a hot topic, no pun intended, the question is, how can we actually instill policies beyond, of course, the rhetoric and the noise around what perhaps needs to be done and shouldn't be done and who's at fault and who isn't at fault. Mm-hmm. How can we really institute policies, long-term policies that's actually going to make a difference on the ground?
Do you not agree, though, Badr, that this is a message we've been pressing for the last 10 years here? Maybe we'll sit here in this set one year and actually discuss some of these policies and how well they're working.
Yes, I don't think so. Yes, of course it's been on the agenda, but not with the same level of passion and fervor. Okay. I think but at least I've been coming here now this is my 9th year, and I certainly haven't seen it discussed again with the same effort and passion and sense of urgency, and that I think is a positive thing.
Yeah.
But that in many ways is just the start.
The measurables, the metrics that we're talking about this year, temperature scores, all of this thing. As someone who runs a company, what does that make you feel? Does that give you hope? Does it put you under pressure? Do you worry that you're not going to live up to the expectations of society? What does it make you? What does it make someone running a company feel?
Yeah, so I think if you think about purpose and nowadays, even a company like Booking.com, you have a role to play. And I think that's the good thing about Davos, that everybody comes together and you can actually talk to topics from multiple angles. But you worry about it and you think through, okay, what do I need to do, right, to make a contribution? And we do that every day. And in travel, a lot can be done. And platforms like Booking are very used to building trust with consumers, transparency. So also on these type of topics, we can play an enormous role.
Final point from you about it. Should we trust the corporates more this year, do you think, having heard what they've said, having seen the way they've reacted to the metrics and scores, etc.? Should we have more trust in the corporate world?
It's up to the corporate world to earn that trust, right?
It is, but should I feel that trust? Do you think it's warranted?
Well, it's up to you whether you feel that trust is on the rise, not just again from a sort of rhetoric perspective or from a sort of announcement perspective, but actual action on the ground. Look, the question today we face is, I think this drive towards a purpose-driven economy sounds great, but what does it actually mean in practice? Of course, it'll be different from one business to the next. It'll be very different from one region to the next. And we need to, I think, move from this sort of broader picture of business really seeing that there perhaps isn't a trade-off between profit and purpose to what that actually means for a specific business and industry and sector. Yeah. And that I think is the challenge ahead. But it's an exciting one. And fundamentally, again, there's a strong business case behind it. It's not a zero-sum game that I'm going to trade off sort of making, doing well with doing good. There is a very strong business case behind it, but it has to be specific to individuals, businesses, countries, and regions of the world.
But
Very quickly.
if you think here, you do see that businesses more and more, I mean, they have initiatives on data privacy, on security, on sustainability, right? And clear goals as well. So I think businesses are playing a bigger and bigger role in these type of topics.
Gillian and Badr, we've got to stop it there. Thanks so much for coming in so early this morning on the show. Right, we often hear from business that things will only move on, and we've been talking about this, if a new generation of leaders comes through with different priorities. Is the same true of government? Is it time to shake things up? Who better to ask than Sanna Marin, who at 34 became Finland's youngest ever Prime Minister when she was elected at the end of last year?